Okay. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you, everyone that is here watching me this rainy day. This is my first talk, and I am a little bit nervous, but I will try to do the best I can to explain myself in this excessive topic. I also would like to say a good thank you, a great thank you to our group, to hosting us here with the venue and pizzas and beer. First of all, who am I? I am Porfírio Ribeiro. I have 38 years old. I am head of development in a group. I work as a software developer for the last 3 years. This is me 5 years ago. I used to be a farmer before I work here. So, about a group. A group is the company I am working. We are developing a solution with IoT and software for help the agricultures to improve their productions and reduce their costs. Work at a group. As we are developing this software, we work with the different technologies. In the backend, we use Java, Spring Boot, and PostgreSQL. In the front end, we are making, for now, a single-page application, and we use TypeScript, CSS, and React. Our website is made in Gatsby, and for DevOps, we use Kubernetes. So I want to know a little bit more about you. How many of you here know React? Everyone, cool. How many of you have also work or know Vue.js? No one, okay. One guy. How many of you know what is this thing here? Preact. Cool. So this all started in June 2019 when even you, the creator of Vue.js, announced an RFC for a new function-based component API in Vue, inspired by React hooks. When this was released, there was a lot of controversy around this, because Vue users were thinking that even you was saying that it will transform Vue in React. But that was not the point. And React lovers were saying, okay, if Vue is becoming React, just use React. But when this was released, I read the RFC, and I found it really interesting. I found it a good approach compared to what we have now with hooks. So, about Preact. Preact is this small little library that has 3 kilobytes, and it's an alternative to React. It can almost do the same thing React does with the same modern API, but with a small size. By the same time, Vue 3 were being announced, the RFC, PreactX was being also developed, and they had for that time, I think it was in beta or RC, I don't remember now, but there was announcing, okay, we can make a new Preact, because this was made from the ground. They started from nothing, and they were able to add new features with better compatibility with React, even smaller size and better performance than they had before. With this better compatibility, there are some people that have big and complex React projects, and they managed to switch to Preact with no effort, or small effort. So at this time, I was looking, because Preact is small. So if it is small, probably the source code is not big. So I will read the source code, and I was trying to understand especially how they were implementing hooks, because hooks was this new thing in React, and I want to understand how it was being implemented here. And I found that they were implementing hooks as a separate bundle of what Preact is. So you could use Preact, and if you don't use hooks, they will not be in your bundle. They are a separate project, not a project but a file. So they managed to do this by having kind of like a plugin system in Preact that allows you to extend to hook into life cycles, renders. So I thought, okay, this is so nice. Maybe I can implement what I've read about View Composition API in Preact. So I started it as a code sandbox project, because you could use it, you could do it on user side. But then as a proof of concept, but in a very short time, I was able to get something good. It was working well. I was enjoying what I was doing. So I decided, okay, why not try to do this in Preact source? So I created a fork and added this project there, and then I made a pull request to the Preact repository. It was very well accepted by the Preact core team. They made suggestions, I made changes, and since the first work I've done, I've already made kind of like 74 commits. I think now it's even more, because before making this screenshot, I added more commits to it. So other tests, other typings, and the examples, and it's being a pleasure to work with this, because the API is really nice, and the community in Preact is really cool. The Preact core team is very nice. In fact, this week they invited me to join the Slack, the private channel they have in Slack, to the Preact core team, and it's nice to see how they are evolving the things in the Preact core. So, what is this new API? What makes this new API? So it's not much. It's 9 functions here. Mostly you have a high order function, if you can call it that, create component, that will mark your functional component as being a composition component. Most of this API, where the names and how it works, was copied from how Vue was implemented. Vue 3 was implemented. But with time, things started to change and adapt a little bit, because Preact reality is different from Vue reality. But most of things have the same names and the same way to work. So create component here, we will just wrap function. And when it renders, Preact will know that it has to do different things to that function. And then you have stakeholders, value, and reactive. You have a simple and fast way to access to context, provide an inject. There is also two reactivity functions, watch and effect, that allows you to watch and react to the different kind of inputs and do something with that. Then you have lifecycle events, on-mounted and unmounted. So for start, we start with create component. Create component, mostly you pass a function to it, and you put your logic, and then you will return a function that will be your render function. This automatically gives you a nice thing, is that it can hack like what you do in forward ref. So you will receive if you pass a ref to my button, you will receive it here, and you can pass it directly to your button without needing to wrap your component again with a forward ref and all that. So the first value holder we have is value. Value, you can think about it like when you do any hook for state, use state, like use state, but instead of giving you one array with the value and the function that will change the value, it gives you an object that will have just one single key that is the value of it. So you can change the value. If you change the value, the object will render again. And here you can access the count.value to get the value of that value. So why do we have to have this kind of object wrapping our value? In JavaScript, you can't pass variables by reference. You have to pass variables by value. So if I have this variable and I set a new value to it, it won't change the value itself. It will change the variable. This concept may seem a little bit weird, but we are already using a thing very close to this, that is useRef and createRef. These both two functions, they return an object with a current. That is the key that you use to use some refs in hook components. So it's almost the same. The difference here is that when you set the value of a value holder, it will render a component. So reactive is kind of like the same as value. The difference with it is that instead of you only having one key, one value, you can have a lot of values. Like here, we will have name and password. So if you change name or if you change the password, it will render the component, and you can always access here as a whole object. So this is nice when you have some state that needs to be handled in the same object. For example, here in this form, I have name and password, and both name and password will be changed in the inputs. And then when I submit, I just need to send the data here to whatever my function I want to do, a fetch or whatever. So why do we have both this and the other? Why don't you just use this? Because the value is a lot more performance than this one. Because in this case, every time you change one of these values, or more, if you have more, you have to reset the internal value of the object with object you have to assign and create a new object inside. So this is very good for this kind of things. But if, for example, you have a value that will be updated very fast, like on a scroll, or when you move your mouse or something like this, it's probably better to use a value. So, provide inject. This API, I borrowed it like it is from what Vue 3 has implemented, and I find this very, very cool to use, because in React or Preact, for use context, you have to create a context. You do react.createContext, and then you receive that context, and then you use that context and wrap. Here you have to wrap this with the context provider to be able to access that context. Here you can just say, okay, I want to provide this context here with this value. So to explain this, for example, here this item is trying to inject item::tag from context in the component. So the component here will be if it has if no one is providing a different value, it will be a div. So when it renders here, it's a div. But then if you wrap it here with list, and list is saying, okay, but item colon tag now is not a div, but nulli. So here, item will be rendered as nulli. And it's very, very easy to do. And imagine that you have to provide here a lot of other values. You would get here like a huge tree of providers, and then you put the whole inside it. So this API makes it more easy to use. So the probably most complicated thing to explain will be watch, the reactivity function. Because this function can do a lot of different things. It could be called watch, computed, derive, memorize, subscribe. Because it actually does everything it says there. So the reactive will receive a source, and the source is what you want to watch, not the watch, sorry. The watch will receive a source. It can have one source or an array of sources. The source can be a value holder, a reactive holder, some context from Preact create context. It can be a function that will observe a property from props, like ID here, or it can be the result of another watch. The callback is optional. If you don't put a callback here, the return from this source here will be returned back, because watch always will return a value holder. Like you have in value, you will have dot value on the watch result with the current value that you are watching here. So the callback allows you to for example, do some memoization of a value. You can maybe you are watching this value and this other value, and then you can put both and you return the value. And it can also be a sync. So let's say you want to fetch something based on some of this source here. Every time the source changes, that fetch will be run again, and you will update the value with the result of it. So here is an example. So here I'm defining items, and this I'm saying, okay, I want to watch the user ID that I get in props. So, and then I want to say, okay, with this ID, I will fetch some API. This is a synchronous function. And because this is a synchronous function, the current value of items will be undefined. If I don't want it to be undefined while I'm still fetching the values here, I can say here, okay, the default value is an empty array. So this is a simple value holder that has the value done. Probably it will have some buttons or whatever that will change it to other thing like pending or whatever. And then here, this other watcher is saying, oh, okay, I want to watch items and filter. And when this change, I want to pick up these items and filter with the filter I set. And I can this will only be executed every time this changes. So, for example, if props.user ID change here, this will rerun. You will get new items. New items will say that they have to update it, and the filtered items will have the current filtered items there. So, if your component re-renders lots of time, but nothing of this has changed, this calculation will not be done. Here's just an example how you can watch just a simple value from a context created with create context. So effect works the same way watch does, but it doesn't have any value. It's just a void function. You get sources as the same way you do in the watch function, and the callback will receive one parameter, one argument with an array of the new args that are the result from source, and we'll get a second argument with the with an array of the old arguments. So if you are updating and that value updated, you get the new value and the old value. And you have a function on cleanup that you can use if you need to do a cleanup on that specific effect. This is how Vue implemented it. Probably I could do this how React does in use effect. Like we'll just return a function. And that function will be run in the cleanup time. So they said in the RFC they wanted to do it this way because they want to be able that the callback there will be an async function. And in React, as you know, if you have a use effect and you pass an async function, it will give an error. So you have to wrap that function in another function to make it work. This way, if you don't need to clean up, you just ignore the argument. If you need to clean up, you can get the argument and call that function with a cleanup function. So a little example here. Let's say I want to affect when input value, some input I have changes. I want to say, okay, document that the title will be this input value. So every time that the input changes, the document title will be updated. Here, for example, I want to be able to do some. I don't know, to make a subscription to something. I don't know, maybe an interaction observer or a store from Redux or whatever. And then I want to, okay, on cleanup, I will unsubscribe to the thing I've done before. So every time this some value changes, I will unsubscribe from the last subscription and subscribe again to the new one. This example here is just showing you are watching this prop.x, props.i, and we're getting the new x, new y, old x, old y. So we could do unmounted and unmounted in effect, because in fact this onCleanup here will also be called when the component goes down. It's unmounted. But since I was implementing the same API Vue had, and they had these functions, and I really find it's more clear to me of what this does. Here you can have unmounted, unmounted, and you can specify directly, I want to run this function when it mounts, I want to run this function when it is unmounting. This could have been done with effects, mostly the same way. So I've been talking for a long time the composition, but where is the composition? So they made this API to be able to do a composition, because in Vue they have a problem that they can't extend, they can't have logic shared between components in an easy way. So this is kind of like what you do when you want to do a custom hook, where you have a function, you call it use whatever, and then that function will call a number of functions or of hooks, it will return a value or whatever. So in this case, I am saying, okay, in this component here, I want to use the mouse position. So when I do this, automatically this mouse push will have the position where the user has the mouse, and every time he moves the mouse, it will be updated. And there's a typo here because this will be mouse push, not push. But this value here will be updated with the last value you have from here. Probably here you should have some way to not update so fast, like throttling or something like this. But this composition could then be used whenever we need it. Whenever I need a mouse position, I just use it there, and I get the value. So the nice thing about this is that it doesn't mean, okay, you have to stop using hooks and use this. No, as now you can use function component with hooks, class components. You can use a composition component, a hooks component, stateless component, a class component, and you can mix everything together without having to do a big change. You can just make, okay, maybe I have this component that only has one hook, is very simple. Probably I don't want to do anything with it. But maybe I have some complex component with like 10 or 20 hooks doing a lot of things, and I'm having to call a lot of use callbacks because I'm having functions that are going to be made again, and that gives me a problem. So you can mix and match the both APIs in Preact. So as you can see here, this is an example of React hooks and Preact composition. If you look at this, it always looks almost the same. The big difference here is that in React hooks, every time this component renders, if you click this button, or if the parent renders, this component, everything will be updated. There will be created a new function for reset, increment, decrement. Here in Composition API, you separate your logic from the render. Many people are getting a little bit confused with React hooks, because you put your logic inside your render function, and then easily you can make a mistake and you can get an infinite loop or anything like this. Here you just say, okay, this is my logic, this is my render, and you define the logic once, and the render can be executed anytime it needs to. So even you also made a tweet when he tried to explain what is the difference in three different libraries or frameworks. It talks about Vue, it talks about React hooks, and Svelte. Not talking about Svelte because that will be for a different talk, because it's a different subject. But between Vue and hooks, you can see a lot of things here, like memory GC costs, stale closures, and a lot of other things. You need to manually optimize with use callback and use memo, because your functions are always being reset every time. So if you have a component, for example, and you know, okay, this component is slow, so probably you call memo around it to make okay, this component will not update unless the props change. But then you pass a function that you define inside the render, and it doesn't do anything, because that function will be always a new function. So probably you need to use callback to wrap that function to make sure that it will never change. So how about the future of this? How can this be released? I have the pull request in Preact Core. It's having a good reception. I really think it will be at some point in time be merged into Core, and probably still needs to improve. It's possible to release it as a separate library that I could put in NPM. The biggest problem here is that some things are a little bit close to the Preact internals. So if there's a new version of Preact that changes that internals, this API would broke. So every time there's a new Preact release, I will have to go to the library and check if it works, run my unit tests, because I have a lot of unit tests in this. It has 100% coverage, and as it is in the Preact core, if there's any change in core, the test will fail. So if it will fail, they will have to change it. So you can follow me on Twitter, GitHub, or send me an email, and I will will like very much to answer your questions or share anything with you guys. And thank you.